are recording this. We're recording. So hello and welcome. Welcome to the second annual Non-Traditionally Trained Engineers in Tech panel discussion. My name is Marco Lindsay and I'm your host and moderator for this afternoon. I'm a board member for the 100 Black Men of the Bay Area and a DEI consultant. This event is the penultimate event of a 4-part series that is focused on increasing access and improving economics in BIPOC communities. Here's the event flow for this afternoon discussion. In a moment, I'll introduce our esteemed panelists. Shortly thereafter, I'll ask them a number of preset questions. After that, we will take a few questions that you all may have posted in the chat box. Then at 1 p.m., we'll go into small group breakout rooms so that you all can connect with our recruiters, panelists, and one another in a smaller setting. At 1:30 p.m., we'll come back to this main room and conclude this meeting. Just as a note, please share your LinkedIn profile in the chat box and add others who will be doing the same. This is a recruiting and networking event, so it'll be prudent for you to connect with as many people as possible, especially from LinkedIn. My recruiters and representatives from tech companies that are on this call, please be sure to include your company name with your screen name so that way our career seekers can easily identify you. I also encourage you to answer any questions that you see come up in the chat box as well that you may have the answer to. As everyone, and for everyone on the call, please keep yourself muted until we go into our chat rooms. And without further ado, I'll begin introducing our panelists. First panelist is Ilya Brown. Ilya Brown is the product lead for health, conversations, and growth at Twitter. Prior to that, he led product for brands at Twitter. Before Twitter, he led the product team at Amplish, an API marketing partner for Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter. Ilya has held a number of leadership roles at eBay and Microsoft during his career. Ilya holds an MBA from UC Berkeley, go Bears, a master's in computer science from the Johns Hopkins University, and a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Our next panelist is Phil Barnett. Phil Barnett is a California native and a UC Berkeley alumni, go Bears, with a degree in environmental economics and policy. After working in the nonprofit space as a program coordinator, he decided to make a shift to web development by completing the program at Dev Bootcamp. He has worked in the industry for the last 5 years and is now a growth team software engineer at Chime, an online bank focused on helping its members achieve financial peace of mind, who is also a co-lead of the AfroChime Community Resource Group. Our next panelist is Ivan Ezigbo. As a software engineer in test at Okta, Ivan Ezigbo ensures the experience of developers in integrating Okta's products and SDKs is seamless. Ivan joined Okta in 2019 and has since easily found his niche working with other developers, product managers, and Q&A engineers in making Okta's products even better. He was drawn to Okta since it's a fast-growing tech company, yet also a supportive community that encourages belonging and embraces diversity. Prior to Okta, Ivan has built his experience working as a software developer in different industries here in the US and abroad. Ivan was born and raised in Nigeria. He obtained his bachelor's in computational science from the Minerva schools at KGI in the heart of San Francisco. Our last but definitely not least panelist is Philip Cloud. Philip Cloud is a lifelong tinkerer who loves building software. Through what some would call a circuitous route, he entered the seamless, boundless world of technology and found a niche somewhere between jazz drumming and a warm GPU. Currently, he leads a team of Rust developers at Standard Cognition, wrangling cameras, clouds, and GPUs in a forum ready to bring automated checkout into the world. These are our panelists. I hope everyone was able to hear me and welcome them. And without further ado, we were gonna go into our preset questions. And so the first question that I have for every panelist, and we can figure out who goes first, but let's talk about how did you get into tech? Help us understand how you made the transition into tech.
I'll jump in. Hi, everybody. So I feel like one of those people that have always been interested in tech for a long time, whether it was just reading articles about new products coming out, understanding, I think a lot have with the mobile phone to understand like what we're having with different app development, but I was kind of at that point where I didn't really understand exactly what was going on. Like I didn't really know what an SDK was, didn't know what an API was. So I was reading all these terms, but making those connection points wasn't really here. And for me, I think it started just as simple as something that's, rooting your phone and trying to unlock new features and new abilities that you typically can't get to, and may or may not void your warranty. But just gave me a way to kind of tinker and trying to understand like what was kind of going on underneath the hood. After that, kind of started just teaching myself basic things about web development, such as like HTML, CSS, just to kind of like dip my toe in. And I always had hope of maybe I would get into the startup game one day down the line, and I think having that knowledge would be something really great. Around the same time, I was actually looking to make a career shift and found out about these different web boot camps. I went to Dev Boot Camp and also about this program called Yes We Code, which was trying to get more people and more women into technology and into engineering roles. Seemed like a perfect fit for me, and that was kind of my kind of on ramp into the field that I now participate in and work in.
Oh, that's nice. Well, for me, I had quite a story to go with that. I'd always been a bit interested in programming. I knew a little bit of the basic like HTML, CSS, and all of that stuff. I think it actually picked when I came to, I think probably during my first day in college. I had this, I went out on a trip with a group of friends, and we went to, I think that was UC Berkeley. And at some point, I think my friends had left me, and I was at this building where there was this really small compartment or hole or something like that on the wall. And just absentmindedly, I reached in, and there was this piece of paper, and it was like a tete-a-tete between two people. I believe there are two students or something, and it was like in pencil and all. And the first line read, "Hello, stranger." And apparently, one of the students was having a difficult time in college, and we just practically just wrote a letter and just put it in there. And somehow another student had found it, and they started responding, and the other student was giving support and all of that. And at that point, I was like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to like have a platform that people can actually anonymously like have conversations like this and give support to others? And that was I started learning how to started learning more about the JavaScript, started learning more about backends, and yeah, that was actually how it started. I was now on a mission to like create something like that. I didn't know how much I'd actually learned until I moved to Korea a couple months later, and I started working for some company. So that was actually my story on how on how my career kicked off.
So I can go next. So I guess in terms of how I got into tech initially, it probably dates all the way back to, when I was a child, and my father was always into computers. In the early 80s, when computers weren't really a thing yet, my father had gotten one of the first computers. It was like this little tiny 5-inch screen on it. And he exposed me to that technology pretty early on. And from that point forward, I just really enjoyed, tinkering with things, taking things apart, breaking them and then trying to rebuild them, or, kind of mashing up different things together in order to try to build new things. And so when it came time for me to go to university, I pretty much knew that I wanted to do something tech related. At the time, I thought I wanted to do something more hardware related, but I had an opportunity to have an internship at Microsoft. And during that summer of my sophomore year at university, I was exposed to this role of product management, which was this interesting mix between kind of the technology and business. And that's what I think really solidified my interest in tech, and decided to pursue that as a career, and pretty much haven't looked back since. 20 years later, it's been a fantastic journey.
I think we got Philip C.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Marco. I kind of came to tech a weird route. I started off in college studying music. I was studying to, basically play jazz drums. Um, Sort of like near the, end of college, I was like, yeah, this is going to be really hard for me to make a living doing this. So I started looking around at um, different opportunities, and I kind of stumbled upon psychology, in particular neuroscience. And fast forward a little bit, I was like looking for a summer internship, um, and I started going around like in various departments in my college, City College of New York, and um, there was a professor there who'd been there for a while. His name was Josh Wallman, and he kind of, you know, gave me a position working on like a research grant for basically human eye movement research. Um, and a lot of the people in that lab were very technical. They weren't software engineers per se, but they were deeply into technical things like math. And we spent 99% of our time like writing MATLAB and doing data analysis. And so that really showed me kind of like the power of computing, and like basically that with computers, there's a ton of freedom to like, make kind of whatever you can imagine. Um, at that point, I was sort of bitten by the bug of computing, and I was like, oh, there's MATLAB, but like, what else is there? And so then I started just like digging around on the internet for Python and kind of taught myself Python. Meanwhile, I was like in grad school, like not doing so well. So I left early, and you know, I guess by sheer luck, like one of the professors that I'd taken a class with, like had this startup that was doing some neuroscience research. So, and they needed somebody to do some software development, and I that was that. That was sort of my first job in tech.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for all helping us understand how you got into tech. I guess the next question is, given that this discussion is on non-traditionally trained engineers in tech, what roles are available within your organizations for people who didn't, maybe didn't go the standard route? Um, yeah, what opportunities are available, and are there opportunities available within your organizations for people like that?
So I guess I'll start. I mean, I think increasingly, the quote unquote standard route is just, I think, less of a thing. So I think that, when I got into tech, 20 years ago, I mean, the standard route was that you probably, majored in some sort of like STEM, degree or something like that, whether that was engineering or computer science or, math or something along those lines. But now if you think about it, like, tech is ubiquitous everywhere. Like Uber, is that a tech company, or is it a transportation, or is it a delivery company? Is it a logistics company? Airbnb, is that like a hotel company, or is it a tech company? And so if you look across kind of the industry of like all the different places where tech exists, what you find is that, at this point, tech is everywhere. And so that means that basically it's relevant to everyone, which means that there's really a role for everyone. And so, I've got a friend of mine who's currently working on a startup where he works closely with chefs, because they're doing like a kind of ghost kitchen food delivery type of business. And so, historically, like, would you say that a chef is somebody that would be employed by a tech company? Probably not, other than to maybe make food for the tech company. But now it's actually a thing. So with ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens, different things like that, what you're seeing is that there's now a role for someone that would historically have worked in a restaurant, or historically might have worked in a line kitchen, now can actually work in a tech company. In the same way, you've got drivers, or you know, cyclists who have historically, you know, maybe not had a role in tech that actually can have a role in tech. Then you actually can go inside of the company and you know, you look at everything from how you think about finance, marketing, design, you know, all these different, you know, pieces, legal, HR, thank you, all these different pieces that, you know, ultimately need to come together in order to deliver on these experiences. And so what you find is that, you know, there's a huge opportunity. You know, I think it's no longer about like, can you be in tech or not? It's really more a matter of like, you know, what companies align well with your interests, and what companies align well with, the you know, kind of skill sets that you have, and then you know, using that to kind of, I think, match up, you know, between, you know, where you might take on a role.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what Ilya, right, said. You know, if you actually look back a couple years ago, you actually find that things have actually shifted. You know, originally, perhaps like 10 years ago, you probably would need a degree, like a bachelor's or a master's or something, you know, to get into the tech world. But right now, you actually find people actually going to boot camps, you know, like getting that experience and just like going in directly from there. And you find that there is actually a good shift, and somehow benefits us, because, you know, necessarily we are no longer making the argument that a degree is needed, is a requirement for you to succeed, as maybe in a tech industry, you know, to contribute or bring in value. But we're actually looking at your skills, we're looking at your passion, and that passion would actually lead you to opportunities that you need. And, you know, if these opportunities are open to you, companies now are opening up these opportunities for people like that. And that is a good shift, that a positive shift that I wanted to highlight there.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Ivan just said, I mean, I think I'm a perfect example that you don't have to go the traditional route. I mean, I went to college and didn't study computer science or engineering, but found that passion later on, and was able to realign myself through going through the boot camp. And I think, you know, that still isn't the standard route to, I guess, being a software engineer, but it is becoming a more normalized route. And, you know, I can see that clearly there. I think my last company I was with, we had about 2 or 3 other bootcamp grads on my individual team, not to mention, you know, across the company. And same here at Chime, there's, you know, 2 or 3 others on my team that have gone through either the same bootcamp or similar bootcamps, and there's a few other across the company. So I think, you know, one of the good things about tech in the engineering field is it's really more about kind of what you know, and not so much as, you know, what was your path to get here. I think that's something we're still like, a lot of our companies are still growing and transitioning to better. But as long as you can kind of demonstrate that you understand the processes that we work with, understand the languages that we work in, and that you'll be able to perform well for the tasks that you'll be given, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely agree with all that. At Standard, we have a number of people who've gone from, you know, non sort of like engineering roles into more technical roles, anywhere from, and I believe some of the people are, you know, some of you will meet later on the breakout sessions. They're on the call. You know, we've had people that kind of transitioned into like data science roles, into machine learning roles. On my team, we have a person who has a degree in political science. We have someone who doesn't have a degree at all. We're sort of very much like unfocused on sort of traditional paths, and focused on, right, what you know, like, you know, your skills, and trying to take the whole sort of like, you know, standard route out of the equation.
Thank you all. Let me ask a follow-up question to that. That's somewhat related, but more so focused on the culture. Something that's been in the news a lot is, you know, ERGs, employee resource groups, right? can you all tell us about what's happening with the employee resource groups at your organization and what they're doing to make the culture more inclusive for Black, brown, and other people who might be underrepresented?
So at Okta, we actually have 3 major groups. People of color are Okta. So this is a community of not just Black people, but also other employees in the company. They also want to show support to that, that community, and it's a way of encouraging diversity in race and also that belonging. Another group we have is Women are Okta, and as you all know, this is a minority group, and we are trying to encourage more women in tech. And there is, I think there is something I really appreciate about Okta. The third one is Pride at Okta. So, the LGBTQ community and all of that. So yeah, there are ways that we really get involved with, fostering these minority groups to sort of like get more involved and feel like they belong at Okta.
Yeah, I can jump in and say, I think ERGs or CRGs, as we call them at Chime, are very important. I remember when I was actually looking to transition to a new company, like having that support community was something that's really important to me. And definitely I identified at Chime right away during that interview process. Coming from a company where I was the only Black engineer, and I think at one point the only Black employee in the whole company, it can be a challenge to have that, even if the culture is good, to still have that, to feel like you are not alone, to have that community there. And I thought it was really important and surprising how Chime kind of invested in that early in their life cycle. Usually you don't see companies that are like under 200 people that have, various CRGs. And I think when I joined, they had, they already had at Chime Hers and Women, they had a Diverse at Chime that was kind of like an all-inclusive group. They had Chime Eagles for the Latinx community. And since I joined, I'm now lead of AfroChime, helped to start our AfroChime CRG, as well as now there's one for immigrants for immigrants. And there's also OutChime was there before I joined as well. So that really speaks to me that when you have that allows people to bring their entire self to a company and to not only bring their entire self, but know that they're welcome and that there's always going to be a space created for you. And I think it also gives us opportunity to learn about one another's culture, and to be able to have those opportunities, within your work environment where you spend, the majority of your time a week. I think it is great. And I know we built really good connections with just my fellow Chimers through some of the different programmings that we've done. And I've learned a lot of, to share a lot about the African American experience and culture, especially with what's going on this year in 2020. I think, with all the police shootings and, things that are happening, like having that space to be able to have a frame of reference to either address or combat it, and to have a space for people to be able to connect is huge.
Yeah, I'll build on what Philip just said. I mean, I think that here at Twitter we call them BRGs. So Blackbirds actually is one of them, and I think it's very important to have these BRGs to not only provide that safe space like Philip just talked about for folks to be a part of, but I think what really gets me excited is when I see people that you wouldn't necessarily traditionally expect to be part of a BRG joining BRGs, right? So non-Black people joining Blackbirds, for instance, because it shows that that allyship. It shows like a genuine interest in actually like learning about other cultures, like Philip said, and I think that ultimately it just makes for a better environment that you ultimately get to work within. And I think that, for me, one of the things that's really kept me at Twitter, I've been here for over 4 years at this point. One of the things that's actually kept me at Twitter is the people. It's the, you know, kind of genuinely great people that you get to work with on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, I think that you see this from the top down. It comes from Jack and his leadership team all the way down throughout the organization, to the point where recently we even announced that, you know, we're actually going to compensate people who are leading these BRG groups, because it shouldn't be something that's a side hustle off, you know, that's in addition to your day job. It's important work. And, you know, one of the ways that we as a company can show that it's important is by making sure that people are compensated for it. And so that was something that we actually announced earlier this month, which I think it, you know, speaks to Jack's leadership in terms of, you know, really, I think, driving these types of things. And you know, Delana Brand, who leads our compensation and diversity teams, you know, them, you know, kind of leading with you know, those types of changes, I think is really important.
Yeah, we just launched our first ERG at Standard, women at Standard. I believe it was last week, and we are very much interested in making more of those, and we're kind of working on a more, you know, general framework so that employees are able to kind of you know, get the resourcing they need to make you know, various ERGs that you know, they would like to make. Yeah, we're just getting started, I would say, is the message there.
Got it. Thank you all. So here's the next question. We have a lot of folks that are on the call because they want a job. You know, they're looking to pivot into tech. Maybe they're in tech and they want to you know, switch organizations. A lot of the folks on the call are probably in technical roles, but many aren't. Some, you know, are looking at non-technical roles. Can you give us a general idea of what are your organizations looking for in a new hire, right? I know you all work there, and so give the folks on the call an idea of, you know, maybe if you're not on a hiring team, what helped you stand out when you applied for the role? But if anything else, you know, what's the culture around, you know, hiring BIPOC?
So I think, you know, for us at Twitter, I mean, I think it starts with, you know, a passion for the product. You know, I think that, you know, we're looking for people that are going to, you know, really, I think, you know, lean into the mission that we've got around Twitter. So, you know, Jack talks about Twitter as being the conversational layer of the internet. It's the place where people come to have healthy conversations around any number of topics, whether that's politics, sports, or, you know, certain TV shows. And I think the, you know, kind of fundamental goal that he has, you know, for the company is that through conversation, we can meaningfully move society forward. And it's through talking it out, actually hearing each other's side and hearing each other's viewpoints. So I think, you know, that mission-driven aspect, I think, is something that's important. I think people that align with that and actually feel that it aligns with their values are going to be the people that are going to have the most success at the company. I think that, you know, it's, you know, someone talked earlier about bringing your authentic self. You know, Twitter, I think, really looks for that. It's, you know, what's unique about you? What are you bringing to the table? And you know, can you articulate what that uniqueness is about you in order to really kind of just talk about, you know, why you would be able to, you know, fundamentally kind of make the ecosystem, the product that we're building, you know, better than it is today. You know, obviously, if you're coming into a tech role, you know, there's certain skill sets that we're going to look for. If you're going to be an engineer, we're going to look for, you know, certain types of languages like, you know, Python and Java and Scala, you know, familiarity with things like Hadoop and, you know, different things like that. If you're coming in more to like a product type role, we're going to be looking for things like, you know, your ability to, you know, really understand who your customer is, identify your customer, build empathy with your customer, and then translate that into a set of requirements, and then, you know, we talk about influence without authority. So your ability to influence a cross-functional set of team members throughout the organization in order to deliver on that work. If you're gonna, apply to something more like in a design type role, I think having an eye for design, not necessarily like pixels on a screen, but more so like interaction design. So, what intuitively is making sense when somebody is interacting with your experience. And so, that's going to be important. In the non kind of like product or engineering roles, it really is going to depend on kind of what the role is. I mean, I think if you're coming into, say, recruiting, it's the ability to kind of be a salesperson for Twitter. You're going to be the first kind of point of contact for any prospective candidates. So really, I think having a passion around sales and talking to people and getting them excited about the opportunities at the company, and really, I think connecting people, networking people is super important. Sales roles are going to be very similar. And then, of course, you can go into things like finance or marketing or different areas like that. But at the end of the day, it's really about being able to articulate how the things that are in your background that show up on your resume ultimately are going to be able to come together in a way such that you are going to add value to the company. Really, at the end of the day, it's about marketing yourself. And I think that's going to be, the most important thing. The last thing I'll say is, take advantage of networking. One of the reasons why I participate in things like this is to meet people. I dropped my LinkedIn into the chat, like feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to, connect you with the right people. So it might not be for, a role that I know about, but maybe I can connect you with some other people at the company who, will have roles that will work for you. And, I'm happy to do that to help connect the dots.
Yeah, I would second everything that Ilya said. I think if I could add anything, it's just that. So I was like, specifically with China, I think, really identifying with our core business and what we're trying to do, and that we are trying to make the financial space, especially in regards to banking, a lot more approachable, a lot more engaging for people that typically don't have an easy inroad. And something that you think is so common actually isn't, and people have obstacles to being able to bank is really important. I think having a passion about that and connecting to that is really important. And then secondly, we're very member focused. So everything that we do and everything that we implement is thinking about our members first, because being an online only bank, you don't have that necessarily usual personal interaction that a typical bank has. So we really think long and hard about how do we make sure that we create the best experience for our members as possible, and make sure that everything is easy to use, it's engaging, it's easily understood. So I think if you come in with those things kind of in mind, that's obviously the first step. Secondly, I would say, especially on the engineering side, and in those roles, which we're coming from, I guess, a non-traditional background, I think, utilize the skills that you have, that I think sometimes people overlook, especially when it comes to technical roles. Communication and listening are huge. Even though I spend a lot of my time coding and working on a computer, a lot of my time is actually spent in meetings, actually working with others, working with product, being able to communicate, understand, what the needs are, how it makes sense to them, and also making sure that you're understanding, we're working through a problem together, that what's happening and that you're able to communicate it. And if you don't, that you're able to communicate that as well is really important. I think, in interviews, that is huge, just being able to have that dialogue that's clear and helping us to get towards a common goal is really important. And I'll say that for time, we're growing rapidly. We just hit 500 people, I think just last week, and I think we're like 200 earlier this year. So we're constantly hiring. So I think as long as you come in with your full self and willing to bring all those skills that you kind of developed over these years into that space, you'll be perfect. You put yourself in a perfect position.
I would say being a great team player is really important. Not just the Rockter, but in other companies. And knowing how to work together with a team to achieve a goal or to follow a vision of a company, or to follow targets, that is really important. And I feel that if you're able to show that you have, you're a good team player, perhaps at an interview, that would give you a lot of, it'll give you an advantage. That would be your trump card. I would also add that at Octa specifically, we are looking for people who are very innovative and creative. Actually, that's one of our core values we were talking about. One of the things we really value in individuals that come in and interview with us is if they embody that characteristic, being constant, because one of our core values is constantly innovating. And we want to find people who have that desire to constantly innovate, and who also have the desire and are willing to learn, because learning and growing is really important in bringing in value to a company. And I would also say that if you're a problem solver, that would be a nice trait to show, because it's really important to have people who are willing to look at a problem and are willing to get down on it and try to figure things out. And so that perseverance in solving a problem is really a good trait that any software engineer or an engineering manager would want to look for in a software engineer. So this is actually from a software engineering perspective. Like I said, creativity, if you're a good team player, you're a good problem solver, innovative. And like Ilya said, passion is really important, because you have to love what you're doing, right? Like you can't just, if you're not passionate about tech, don't be in tech. If you're passionate about something else, just whatever you're passionate about, follow it, because that is going to reflect on your work. And it's really important to know where your passion is and pursue your passion. That is what I would advise.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, and yeah, similarly, I think at Standard we look for people who are passionate about their own personal growth and are very passionate about kind of learning new things all the time. We're the company's goal is basically to bring like a totally seamless checkout experience to shoppers, and so that is, as of now, like a kind of an unsolved problem. And so we're constantly learning new things, discovering new things, having to build things that we thought we didn't need to build, and kind of like dealing with everything all the way down to sort of camera like IP stacks up to kind of visualization tools for our pose estimation models. So we're looking for everything in terms of of engineering. And with respect to our company values, one of the things that we value a lot is that in hiring new people is that they kind of demonstrate situations in which they're able to show that they've like created equity for a person or another group of people. And I think this translates pretty well into our product. Like we're very concerned about privacy. We're very concerned about making sure that our models are not biased in any way. So I think, yeah, we're kind of looking for people who are passionate about their own growth and are kind of care a lot about creating equity for others.
Thank you. Here's a quick question. What advice would you give folks that are looking to break into tech? We got some folks on this call who aren't in tech and they want to get into tech. And so if you could think back to when you were transitioning, what advice do you think that you could have benefited from? Or, as you've been in the industry for a while, what can we tell them to help them be successful in their careers?
So I did mention passion earlier. I believe that is really important. Another thing I would highlight is self-confidence. Having confidence in what you can offer. And, of course, definitely give room for growth, give room to learn. You don't, you should have humble confidence in what you can offer. And I believe that somehow self-confidence would helps engineers a lot in in achieving as much as, or at least achieving their potential or reaching their potential. And I've actually found that with me and with my friends who, about the same time after college, we all went into tech, interviewing for these companies, even from the very first year when you're like trying to work and sort of like prove yourself, having that self-confidence is really key. And it would help you a long way in your career, I believe.
So I think one thing maybe is don't think of it as trying to break into tech. Think of it as you're applying to your next job. And to Ivan's part, like, it starts with you coming in with being confident that you can get the role, right? I think that if you approach it with kind of an apprehensiveness, then that actually is what's gonna potentially hold you back. So I mean, I think there's a few tactical things that you can do. So for instance, like, if your resume doesn't have kind of traditional tech companies on it, then in each of your descriptions, try to frame what you did in things that are kind of tech related, right? The only difference between a tech company and a non-tech company, quote unquote, is really that a tech company leverages technology to try to speed up, accelerate, automate some of the workflows that ultimately need to get done, right? Like the difference between a tech finance company versus a non-tech quote unquote finance company is basically one of them is going to use technology in order to try to increase efficiency or somehow bring the cost down or different things like that. And so really what you want to be able to speak to is how you might have leveraged technology in your prior roles in order to increase efficiency, automate processes, or somehow make you better at ultimately delivering on your deliverables at the end of the day, right? And that's why I think that part of it is really about marketing. It's like, how are you marketing the things that you previously did and that experience, and how are you then using that to be brought in, and that can be everything from how you might have, if you were a marketer and you were leveraging, social media platforms, like that was the technology that you were using in order to, do your job. You should talk about that, because then that your next job might be at a social media company, like you don't know. And so I think, sometimes the mistake that people can make is they take their one resume, they never update anything beyond the most recent job that they had, and then they start sending that out. And I always challenge people to redo your entire resume, because you need to make sure that it tells a story. It needs to tell the story that is oriented around the types of roles that you're currently applying for. And so I think that that's kind of tactically something, very, very specific that you can do. I think the other thing, is networking. We talked about that earlier. Marco also talked about that, events like these, like these are super important, to just network, find people. The best way to get a role at any company, whether it's tech or not, is to know somebody that's already at the company, right? Because you need to just get a foot in the door. And I think the biggest difference between, people of color, and maybe, their kind of Caucasian counterparts is we don't necessarily have the same extensive Rolodex that some of our peers might have, that we get to reach out to and get introduced into companies. So it's important that we work together and we help each other out, and we help each other essentially augment our Rolodexes and make the introductions, connect people, and once the person is connected, then it's on them to get across the finish line. Ultimately, they have to be competent, and they're going to have to be able to pass the interviews and all that kind of stuff. But usually, the most difficult part is actually getting your foot in the door. So that's where I would focus. Is who do you know? Who do you know who might know somebody who knows somebody that you can know, that's going to get you a conversation so that you can tell them how awesome you are. that's where I would focus.
Yeah, I would say if you're early in your journey, I would focus maybe more on, I think to this point, like the networking and identifying people that work in tech in different capacities, like what part of the sector they work in. Do they work mainly on user facing things? Do they mainly work on maybe the architecture, or they work on some of the backend services that support, what the user sees, or maybe they do something like machine learning or AI. That way you kind of get an idea of like where you might be more passionate or where you might be more interested in. And then you can kind of start your learning journey kind of from there. And I'll say if you're kind of further along in the process, you've kind of been learning, find interesting innovative ways to kind of demonstrate your knowledge, whether it's, working on a project that you can show off, maybe contributing to an open source project as well, or, connecting with the community. There's usually, I'm sure they're still going on, but there were definitely a lot more, I think, before COVID, different meetups to get involved in a technology community, maybe based on a particular language or a particular service. And then that way you'll meet other people, you'll develop your skills, and maybe some of the people that you meet there could also be a pathway where you find and enroll into a company that you may like.
Yeah, the open source thing kind of really resonates with me. I spent a lot of my like grad school hours doing open source when I probably should have been doing something else, like studying for the next exam or something. But I ended up kind of just rabbit holing into Python and sort of like, data analysis frameworks and tooling. And I would say that open source, I thought was like a pretty good opportunity for someone who had no, but like sort of MATLAB experience, data analysis experience, to start doing software engineering. Like, I think the first sort of like code change I proposed to a code base was just like a giant comment worth of code. And like, of course, everybody on the repo was like, hey, like, what the hell are you doing? So I think like open source ended up being a pretty good route, I think, to cut my teeth on, so to speak. As far as kind of early career advice, I would say like hop jobs until you find something that you're really passionate about. Like, don't like give it at least a year, because like a lot of times it can take a year for a thing to gel, and like I think a year is probably enough time to judge like whether you could, do another year. But like don't hesitate to move and worry kind of about, like having, a length of time, on a resume. Like, you want to find what you're passionate about, because presumably the ultimate goal like is to be happy with what you're doing in your career, and as Philip said, like where you're spending most of your day. And then I think if you like don't, I would say, try to not get discouraged by setbacks. I'm fully aware that the setbacks that I experience are probably very different from the setbacks that a lot of the people on this call have experienced. I can, the kind of like first tech interview I had, like somebody at Google, like on the SRE, the site reliability engineering team, I think had like reached out to me, and then I was like, oh, amazing, Google. Like, and I was like, this is not going to go well. And it didn't. And, we were like coding on a Google Doc, and I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I'm so underprepared for this. And like, since then I've had a number of like crap interviews. And I think like kind of as you, practice for interviews, and as you do more interviews, like you'll gain a lot of confidence with the interviewing process itself, which I think has a fair amount of like kind of social and like interaction overhead that you want to have like like honed by the time you get there. So like interview at companies where you're like, yeah, like it'll probably be like, maybe I want to work here, maybe I don't, but you can use it as like a testing ground for your interview skills. There's also less, I think, kind of emotional risk there. You tend to get less discouraged if you're not as invested in like working there. So, yeah.
Just want to remind everyone that in a few moments, we'll actually be going into our breakout rooms. But for now, if you have any questions that you want to pose to our panelists, please put them in the chat box. We're going to continue on, but we got a lot of folks on the line that are here, open and willing to answer any questions that you can have. And so utilize it, take advantage, because you may not have an opportunity like this anytime in the near future. Here's another question, and it goes off the beaten path a bit, but what's the most difficult part of being in tech? And I'll lob that out there for anyone to speak to.
Okay, I think the first problem is that things keep changing in tech. Like, you know, I don't know if you, so in the past 6 years, for instance, even JavaScript itself, like the syntax, you know, like, and now you have promises, you have lets, you have, you know, things keep changing, and to remain on demand in the markets, you need to be on top of this. And sometimes, I mean, you know, it's a good thing. It's also sometimes frustrating to always, you know, have to look out and be like, oh, or it's actually new now. What is this new thing that I can actually bring into my company? You know, and like, for instance, we were a couple months ago, I found out this new technology, which is robotic process automation, RPA, which is now a new thing that uses AI and machine learning to help in testing, you know, and that actually makes testing a lot easier. And the only way you could actually know about these things is if you're, you know, making the conscious effort to, you know, to find them out, to be on top of, you know, new changes or improvements, you know. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's been one of the most difficult things.
So I think one of the most difficult things about being in tech is that there's no shortage of things to fix, right? You're never actually like done. And so there's that can be overwhelming at times, because, you know, it can feel like, you know, there's still so much more to do. But I think it's also, you know, an opportunity, because it means that, you know, there's always like, you know, an improvement that you can make. And even there, you know, after you've made an improvement, there's probably an improvement to the improvement that you can make. And I think to Ivan's point, I mean, you know, those who can kind of remain in somewhat of a learning mindset and kind of constantly like learn new things are going to thrive, because of the fact that you're always kind of seeking out new ways to ultimately get stuff done. Because not only does stuff move fast, but the job is also just never done. And so it's one of these kind of somewhat frenetic types of experiences where things are moving very quickly, but at the same time, you never actually fully get across the finish line. So it's like, you have to find a way to kind of like count, you know, take advantage of the milestones that you have accomplished and really celebrate them, in order to, you know, not get overwhelmed and discouraged.
Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I definitely, there's definitely like an unending stream of just stuff to do, I think, which can be pretty stressful. It's like you're kind of in this oscillating, you know, system where you're like, oh man, this is super exciting. And then the next day you're like, oh my God, will it ever end? You know, like this stream of things. So I guess, yeah, finding that point at which finding those milestones like within your own work and within your team's work more broadly, and like kind of at the company level as well, gives you sort of like, I think, a little bit of satisfaction. Like, hey, when can we call this project like done for now? So that it's a little bit less stressful. Like on a personal level, I since I grew up in New York, and then I like lived in the Bay Area for a little while, like that sort of culture difference was pretty shocking to me. Like, I think in New York, people tend to be like super rude and like in your face, and they just like will not like, it will not mince words about anything. And like, you know, when I was in the Bay Area, there's like I feel like there's a big need to kind of be positive and like everything's awesome all the time. And like, I think, I think like the tech industry in general, like probably doesn't acknowledge enough that like things are not always awesome. And so yeah, that was one thing that I find pretty challenging.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of covered it really well. So I'm just gonna just second everything they said. Let us go on to the next question.
So given that we're at the top of the bottom of the hour, say, we'll take one question from the audience. So what advice do you have on landing interviews for new non-functional roles, where all the job postings require 3+ years of prior experience in that particular function? Yeah, let's go there. It says, assuming you've already taken several boot camp type courses in that field, the only way to get prior experience in the role is to get hired in the first place. The classic conundrum.
So I think a couple comments. I mean, I think one of the challenges, I think, for people of color, and I think it has hit, you know, women as well, is when we read, you know, job requirements, we tend to look at the requirements as requirements, like hard requirements, whereas many people, you know, actually will look at the requirements and see them as suggestions or guidelines, and apply for the roles anyways. I would encourage everybody to look at them as suggestions. Like, really what it is it's a barometer. It's, you know, think of it as kind of like a proxy to try to say like, hey, you're going to come in and at least have some idea of what you're talking about. And it's less about having, you know, years of experience in a specific role, and more about having years of experience with having certain skills, right? You know, now obviously, like, you know, if you're straight out of college, don't apply for a vice president role. Like, you know, the requirements are in there to give you an understanding of the type of job that you're going to need to do, and you're not going to be able to do the job. So, you know, I think you'd be naive to apply to such a role. But if on the other hand, like, you know, you've got, say, you know, let's say that you have 3 years worth of experience working in an accounting firm, as like, you know, an associate accountant or something like that. And now you're applying to a role at Twitter to work in maybe like the finance department, you know, at Twitter. Like, really then, you know, the fact that you haven't had 3 years of experience working in a tech company in a finance role doesn't really matter, because you can talk about 3 years of experience that you had working in an accounting role, which is finance, close enough to finance, and be able to like then position that skill set as something that then, you know, you can talk about, you know, in this role. And then I think the specific number of years is really kind of just, you know, a proxy. People are going to, like, you know, progress it at different, you know, kind of speeds. Some people might work for a year and they've got it. Like, you know, they're the equivalent of having 3 years of experience, right? Another person is going to work for 10 years and they still don't have the 3 years worth of experience. And so I think that part of it is really about trying to, you know, try to read between the lines of the job description of, like, you know, what is it that they're actually going to be expecting me to do? And then now, how do I position the experience that I've got to explain that I actually have enough of a qualification for them to at least take a phone call with me, at which point you need to then leverage that phone call to learn more about the position, as to, you know, treat it as a two-way conversation, right? You need to learn more about the position, and whether you actually have the qualifications or not, in the same way that they're learning about you. And so I think that, you know, really the first step is, you know, how do you get your foot in the door? And then after that, then it's about, you know, be honest with yourself. Like, if after you're going through the interviews and you're talking to them and, you know, they explain kind of what the role is, and you start to think like, you know what, maybe this role actually is not for me. Like, now I learned something and I can take that into the next set of interviews. You know, to Philip's earlier point, like, use interviews like training. You know, they ultimately are good practice for you to figure out, like, what's a fit, what's not a fit. How can I talk about my skills? what ways that I talk about my skills are actually going to resonate versus not resonate. And so you want to try to get as much of that practice under your belt as possible. And, that means like, taking interviews even for companies that you have no interest in actually going to.
Yeah, I would add to that, with every technical role open that you'll see like the requirements. Only so many of them are technical. There are a ton of different aspects of the job and things that they're looking for that aren't technical. So make sure that you showcase those skills as strong as you can, because I'm pretty sure you have it from previous work experience. And I'll just reiterate one other thing. I think find other ways, if you don't have the years of experience, to demonstrate that experience through like, your own personal projects or projects with other people or open source, so that you still have those technical skills that are just not contained within a traditional job. And then lastly, I would say, network with the recruiters, reach out, and there's tons of them on this call today, and be able to showcase to them like, the things that you have that aren't the traditional experience, and then find out more about the role, like Ilya was saying, so that you can find out better if it is a good fit for you, or other people that are on that team that you might be looking to join.
I was just laughing when Ilya said the thing about vice president. During my time, I think I was a little bit of a rascal, so I did apply for more senior roles at the time. The reason for that was because I wasn't expecting I was going to get them. I was just I wanted to use those as a good prep for the roles I wanted, and because there is a lot more challenge, I guess, with some of these roles, and you begin to see like if you're applying for maybe a more senior role in engineering, you begin to see what are important areas, important skills that some of these managers are looking for. And so that was the way I thought about it as a then. And I did a couple of interviews. Some of them went well, but but yeah, it was I guess it was the mindset there that kind of like mattered. But yes, like Ilya said, definitely look for what you're passionate about. Don't, I read a comment where someone was like, okay, what about a role that asks you to have like, I don't know, 5+ experience, it doesn't really matter. Apply anyway, like just throw in your resume, go for the interview. You might be an awesome person and they would want you, regardless of the number of experiences that you have under your belt. There is always something that, interviews are usually holistic, and it's not just that one thing that people are looking for to decide on whether you would be a great fit in a team. So definitely, of course, don't go too far, but like I did. But yeah, I would encourage you to feel more confident about, putting in your resume, throwing your resume wherever you have an interest in.
Thank you, everyone. This is going to conclude the official panel discussion. In a moment, you'll be placed in the breakout rooms. If you haven't already done so, please share your LinkedIn information in the chat box and add folks, reach out to these recruiters. In case any of the recruiters have to leave, I want to formally thank all 4 of our panelists for providing us with so many insights into tech. I want to thank our corporate partners, Twitter, Okta, Chime, and Standard Cognition for making this event a reality. And I also want to invite you all to the final event of the year that we'll be hosting, that'll be taking place on November 17th. As we're part of the Dreamers in Tech, on Bridging the Gap in Tech. I'll put the link in the chat now, but please register for that event and stay on the lookout for emails from me about submitting your resumes to our recruiters who are really eager to hire you. And so at this point, we're gonna have everyone go on a breakout room so that way you can connect in a small group setting with our panelists, with our recruiters, talk about your situation, learn more from them about your next role in tech. Thank you all for joining us. We will come back at 1:30, but if anyone needs to leave before then, I want to thank you for being on the call.